Welcome back, everyone. You've returned to the space where we shed our masks and dive headfirst into the truths most people avoid. If you're here, it means you're ready for more than surface-level comfort. You're here to confront, to question, and to unravel the narratives we've been taught to accept. Today, we're stepping into the first chapter of The Origins of Genius and Fascism by Alexander Nevzorov. A mind whose raw, unfiltered insights have set fires across the intellectual landscape of the Russian-speaking world. This book isn't just a read, it's a challenge, a confrontation with humanity's deepest and darkest corners. And while his work remains largely unknown here, I've taken it upon myself to bring Nevzorov's relentless inquiry to you, our English-speaking listeners, because there's power in his words that demands to be shared. So, as we begin this journey through his work, understand this isn't about passive listening. It's about questioning the very foundations of who we are and what we believe. If you're here, you're ready for that. Stay tuned. Subscribe wherever you listen. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube at Mindset Maverick, TikTok, and Instagram. Let's build this community of truth seekers together. And now, buckle up and prepare. We're about to embark on a path that won't leave any of us unchanged. Chapter 1. The Brain of Jesus and the Brain of Satan. Jesus Christ was exceptionally lucky. In his time, post-mortem brain examinations were not customary. Even the most notorious corpses were neither dissected nor studied. This was a missed opportunity. A mere 3 minutes with a lancet and another 5 with a grinder could have provided a complete understanding of the properties and origins of this enigmatic figure. During that era, anyone could weave tales about themselves. It was not only possible but trendy to present oneself as a messiah, a prophet, or a divine kin. The messianic enterprise was thriving, albeit perilous. Claims of divine lineage often led to significant Jewish controversies, yet some skilled individuals managed to ascend to the status of major cult figures, eventually securing spots in local or even global pantheons. Each new deity inevitably caused its own set of issues, typically localized and brief. However, Jesus outshone his contemporaries, becoming a lasting force of turmoil. Lions choked on stale fanatics in Roman arenas, astronomers crackled in the flames, and preachers multiplied like lice. For nearly 20 centuries, poor Homo sapiens was condemned to ignorance, filth, and blind faith. A simple autopsy after death could have easily shown who Jesus really was. This would have saved a lot of arguments and suffering for both scholars and martyrs. Regrettably, this examination was never conducted. But today, we can rectify this ancient oversight. Although the DNA of the Christian deity is beyond our reach, lost when the Shroud of Turin was painted in the 14th century, we theoretically have access to his brain, which could reveal everything about its bearer. The convolutions, nuclei, and ventricles of the brain encode all the capabilities and potential of the organism. Any supernatural or anomalous traits would inevitably be reflected in corresponding neurological anomalies. It's worth noting that no creature possesses qualities beyond those defined by the structures of its brain or its genome. While it would be fascinating to saw open the skull of Jesus and explore its contents, his counterpart's brain, that of Satan, is equally intriguing. The fabled horns of the devil pose no problem for an experienced anatomist. The circular incision can start just beneath them. Of course, both characters are fictional creations, yet the necrotic marks left by these fantasies on humanity's throat are all too real. Nevertheless, this is irrelevant. Fantasy can be dissected as effectively as any real corpse. The question arises, why delve into the imagined heads of ancient magicians and gods with a scalpel? The answer is simple. They asked for it. Wow, isn't it fascinating how myths and science constantly bump into each other like this? It makes you wonder, are we really dissecting fantasies, or are we just uncovering the myths we've built around ourselves? We know that humans are storytellers first, scientists second. Maybe the truth isn't in the scalpels, but in the courage to admit we're weaving new myths every day. What do you think? Is science just another story we tell ourselves to make sense of the chaos? You can't embody mystery without consequences. Moreover, we are dealing with the most influential educators of humanity. By inventing Christ and Satan, people gave themselves unlimited freedom to project all their notions of extraordinary and exceptional personalities. If there are any skulls to seek juicy examples of genius, it's theirs. It's crucial to note that this duo was considered the purveyors of unique properties and abilities. They offered so-called genius in exchange for so-called souls. The fact that both figures are fictional is irrelevant. Jesus and Satan unwittingly became the spindles upon which all things mysterious and irrational were wound. Thanks largely to this biblical duo, there remains a belief that the mind has a supernatural or at least inexplicable origin. This mystery has spawned and nurtured a host of derivatives: the soul, intuition, spiritualism, occultism, personality, clairvoyance, extrasensory perception, prophecy, esotericism, cognitive science, synesthesia, psychotherapy, spirituality, and much more. All these phenomena are interconnected, sharing common origins and wielding immense influence. It would be beneficial to untangle them as well. Here it makes sense to unleash science. Ideally, science itself should have broken free to dismantle these derivatives of faith. But let's not be deluded. Science ceased being a fighter long ago. At best, it's a timid squire ready to betray at a moment's notice. It's unreliable even for minor skirmishes. When faced with seasoned, well-dressed spirituality, it typically cowers. Recall that in the 18th century, the first public challenge to the church wasn't from science, but rather from the cheeky satire of Julien Offray de la Métrie and Holbach. Science, meanwhile, meekly fiddled with microscopes, pretending it had no part in the mischief of Julien Offray de la Métrie and Paul Henry. Well, here we go again. Science, playing the quiet observer while the real provocateurs stir the pot. Honestly, this hits a nerve. Sorry, dear listeners, but I have to say it. When did science lose its spine? Tricksters thrive in chaos and questioning boundaries, but science seems content to stay safe, hiding behind its microscopes. What about you? Do you think today's thinkers have the guts to challenge the dogmas, or are they just playing it safe? Yet, the cowardice and hypocrisy of science are understandable and forgivable. It has a troubled childhood and a dramatic biography. Pharaohs stuffed it into mummies, while popes roasted it at the stake. When the pharaohs perished and the popes grew weary, generals took over, forcing poor science to create massive bombs. Small wonder it went a bit mad. Incidentally, let's not forget there are about 25,000 so-called saints in Catholicism and Orthodoxy. Their remains are meticulously preserved by the Church. In reliquaries we find the blood, sweat, tears, milk, hands, feet, heads, ribs, fingers, hair, teeth, hearts, and stomachs of apostles, martyrs, and venerables. But if you seek their brains among 12 million such artifacts, you will find none. No reliquary contains even a half-dried convolution of a saint. But I digress. Let's return to our topic and continue. The prospect of examining the hemispheres of Jesus or Lucifer seems tempting, yet unrealistic. However, that's not the case. Today, we can conduct a detailed analysis of the brain of any creature, even if it's pure fiction and never existed in reality. There's no problem lining up jars with the brains of all mythical characters from Job to Snow White. Wandering along the edge of absurdity is a unique pleasure. Unfortunately, here it will not be experienced. Everything is mundane and bland, falling within the realms of academic physiology, the central nervous system, and standard comparative anatomy. How can we study the brain of a fictional being? Let me explain. To clarify, let's start with the straightforward scenario of a post-mortem examination of a very real skull. For this purpose, the head of a Chinese gymnast or a Russian czar will do equally well. The identity is irrelevant as long as the formaldehyde is fresh. We slice, saw, extract the brain, fix it, and slice it. By dissecting and examining it, we can accurately describe both the behavior of its owner and all their characteristics, down to age, health, and habits. The dimensions of the hemispheres, nuclei, amygdalae, and other structures will reveal everything about its owner. Errors are possible but unlikely. The connections between behavioral nuances and cerebral substrates are too well known. The brain, particularly the mammalian brain, is an extremely logical and primitive structure, devoid of mysteries. 125 diligent scholars have left nothing mysterious or contentious in this field. By dissecting the ventricles and gyral stems, we can reliably sketch a biological portrait of the one who carried this assembly in their skull. Crafting a social portrait is more challenging, but overall it's achievable, except for minor details like the subject's mustache shape or political views. I hope this is clear. Excellent. Excellent? Nevzorov is confident we all understand perfectly, but do we really? Let's make sure we're on the same page. He's saying that by dissecting a brain, be it of a Chinese gymnast or a Russian czar, science can reconstruct nearly everything about its owner, their habits, health, and even personality traits. The brain, as he puts it, is a logical, primitive structure devoid of mystery. Now, for those who might not be familiar, a Russian czar was the Emperor of Russia, a figure of immense power and influence in history. Think of it as the ultimate symbol of authority and human complexity. And yet, Nevzorov suggests, even their thoughts and personality could be reduced to a biological portrait through the study of their brain. But here's the question. Do you agree with him? Can the story of a life, its essence, really be captured in such a mechanical way? Let me know what you think. Does this idea sit well with you? So, we've considered the straightforward option. Through the anatomy and physiology of the brain, we can easily reconstruct the behavior of its carrier, but we can also perform the reverse. Knowing the behavior and characteristics of a character, we can easily construct their brain, then examine it and make a definitive judgment about the nature of its owner. Eating habits, lifestyle, sexual needs, thermoregulation, and responses to stimuli allow for a detailed reconstruction of any skull's contents. Of course, this trick is only possible if much is known about the being. Our case is precisely this. Thanks to theologians, evangelists, demonologists, philosophers, writers, bibliologists, painters, iconographers, and inquisitors, we have ample material on both the horned and the crucified. Certainly, this material must be stripped of the fantastical frills like resurrections, immaculate conceptions, and sulphurous apparitions. These tales wander through all religions and aren't specific traits of our heroes. Healing and ascension are standard sauces served with virtually every new god. For the ancient Roman vagabonds, the first Christians, the sauce was important, but it long ago lost its flavor. Even after stripping away the embellishments, enough remains for a detailed reconstruction. Recall that we're creating this based on the well-known quintessential qualities of both the fallen angel and his saccharine opponent. We know how they both wept, multiplied, barely moved, pondered, relieved themselves, and performed tricks. We know what saddened and delighted them. All these details easily translate into the architecture of their cerebral hemispheres. It's sufficient to assemble an impeccably accurate cerebral model, granting us the right to draw definitive conclusions about the nature and origins of our protagonists. Yet, when we metaphorically lift the horned lid of Satan's skull, we find the most mundane hemispheres, along with an ordinary brainstem and a rather tedious cerebellum. In other words, it's a standard-issue Homo sapien brain. Nothing extraordinary, just as with Jesus. Their reputation suggested otherwise. According to legend, the brains of Jesus and Satan should have displayed radical anomalies, both general and structural. Perhaps a third hemisphere or a different electrochemical makeup. The convolutions of Satan's brain should have formed the number 666, even sparking and smoking. Meanwhile, Jesus' brain might resemble a festive Easter cake, adorned with sugar icing, marzipan, and nuts. One might wish for their brains to send some anatomical signal, but there's none. This is peculiar, as any supernatural abilities require physiological support and regulation. For instance, platypuses possess electroreception, while bats have echolocation. Even these relatively mundane talents have their anatomical substrates. In bats, it's the unique dimensions of the colliculi, and in platypuses, the configuration of the temporal zones. A supernatural brain should be the foundation for truly supernatural abilities. But we have no grounds to depict anything special within their skulls. An abnormal brain doesn't seem to be forthcoming. There's no basis to speak of Jesus' electroreception or Satan's infrared vision, let alone anything greater. Their motivations and reactions immediately reveal them as possessors of typical primate brains. Yes, with a respectable 6-layer cortex housing sets of conditioned reflexes. But each reflex is clearly tied to specific cultural contexts, rooted in human origins. Like any other Homo sapien, their brains testify to the full dependence of mental activity and the immortal soul on the state of the intestines, blood rhythm, muscle function, and so on. both our subjects are as physiological as their followers. As a result, any hallucinogenic substance such as alcohol, mushrooms, and marijuana can easily alter their consciousness. Their brains are defenseless against chlorpromazine, fast rides, pain, and rhythmic music. Diacetylmorphine could twist them, altering their behavior scandalously. Jesus or Satan on a narcotic binge would be quite a spectacle, but I digress. In short, there's no doubt. The fillers of these two skulls have an evolutionary animal origin. In other words, within Jesus' head, we find the brain of the one who invented him. Likewise with Satan. Alas, what could convince us otherwise? What qualities would prompt us to revise their cerebral hemispheres? Nothing special. A single small miracle could suffice, but not from the mythical stew. A miracle undeniable and immune to skepticism. Changing their brain's configuration requires something absolutely impervious to doubt, equally convincing to mystics and cynics alike. For example, demonstrating the ability to stroll through time with a first-century understanding of humanity and the universe. Knowledge that only emerged in the 20th century. Jesus wouldn't need to recite Schrödinger's wave equation. Any triviality would suffice. Knowledge of a gaslighter's construction, or a dry cleaning tag forgotten on a tunic. Even a hint of these could position the Horned One and the Crucified as bearers of supernatural traits. But even this is lacking. Neither stepped beyond the knowledge of their time. Jesus' adventures bear the dreary stamp of a narrative crafted by a 2nd or 3rd century human. All right. Jesus with his rabbinical droning, but even the curious trickster Satan, born in the prison of archaic concepts, remained there until his image faded. He didn't discover quantum mechanics in the 8th century, didn't describe the moon's far side, didn't pull antibiotics from his pocket, didn't have pockets for that matter. A sad sight indeed, nothing sensational, everything explainable. In inventing another god or demon, people could only sculpt their image from their own concepts. And those were quite meager at the time, making it pointless to seek anything supernatural or universal in Jesus. Or Satan, equally applicable across all ages. Yes, it's disheartening. But we're not in a hurry to seal their skulls or replace the skin flaps. These guys might still be useful, so let them lie and air out. The banality of their convolutions irrevocably buries hopes for mysteries and souls. That's not the real issue. Isn't that a striking idea? We keep searching for something extraordinary in figures like Jesus or Satan, only to realize they're just reflections of ourselves. It's almost disappointing, right? But maybe that's the lesson here. Instead of chasing myths or clinging to fabricated greatness, maybe it's time to confront the truth about our own nature. What do you think, dear listeners? Is greatness really about the supernatural, or is it hidden in the courage to face our own realities? Share your thoughts. I'd love to hear your take on this. The devil and his opponent were the last chance to avoid writing this treatise. Why bother if there's a solid, respectable doctrine that explains everything? According to it, genius has a supernatural origin, is impervious to scalpels, and has no place for determinism and physiology, just as in the brain itself. According to this doctrine, wireless Jesus simply receives celestial Wi-Fi. Any part of his body could serve as a receiver, not just the brain. The same goes for Satan. Both could distribute this Wi-Fi at will, rewarding either very bad or very good behavior. This ancient notion of genius. Thanks to this Wi-Fi, devices like Leonardo da Vinci, Immanuel Kant, Bach, and others functioned. Genius could have been stamped with ignoramus et ignorabimus, we do not know and will not know, and left at that. But no, a simple skull autopsy of the most seasoned geniuses dashed hopes of dodging this subject. It turned out to be quite dissectable. We'll have to calculate the evolutionary path of genius, as well as its true nature. It's tedious, but not difficult. Surprisingly, no one has done it yet. Simply because no one is around to tackle the matter. Science, of course, is out of its depth. It could offer new inputs, but even the simple extraction of facts on the topic has stalled. Minds exhausted, the main material extracted and circulated, while scientific gnomes have dwindled to mere dwarfs. The three disciplines that fuel our discussion, anthropology, paleoanthropology, and brain physiology, fell out of vogue back in the 1970s. As expected, they were consigned to academic oblivion. Sure, some still dabble in these fields, but without enthusiasm and with little to show for it. It's no surprise given that years of labor there are rewarded only with metaphorical hemorrhoids. Alright folks, after diving deep into the nature of genius and those three disciplines that seem to have taken a backseat since the 70s, let's take a little break. It's the perfect time to grab a cup of coffee, or if you're feeling adventurous, maybe even light up something a bit more herbal. But hey, no judgments here. This is also a great moment to subscribe to our podcast wherever you like to listen, and check us out on social media. All the links are in the description of this episode, so take a moment to stretch your legs, ponder the mysteries of life, or just enjoy a bit of a breather. We'll be back in no time to continue with Chapter 2. Remember, life is too short, like finding Wi-Fi when you need it most. So let's use this moment to recharge and prepare for what's next. Alright, we're back. Now that we've recharged, let's dive back into the fascinating world of Alexander Nevzorov's ideas. Here we go with Chapter 2, Fire in the Theater of Conditioned Reflexes. Genius remains as unscientific a concept as ever. For this reason, a precise definition eludes us, as do strict criteria. Genius is a scandalous and slippery category, a true brain teaser. Leveraging the breadth of this term, the pantheon of human geniuses is crowded with a motley crew of crooning and posturing figures, from generals to composers. They are deemed geniuses, forming a caste of beings whose success defies rational explanation. Their role in human culture is immensely significant. First, geniuses, with their symphonies and formulas, elevate the overall prestige of Homo sapiens. Much like medal-winning poodles enhance the reputation of their breed. The scruffiest dog can always point to the gleaming medals of its kind and suggest that by birthright, it too shares this connection. The same goes for people. Thanks to the existence of geniuses, even the most hopeless dimwits find solace in belonging to the smartest species. Isn't it ironic how we cling to the brilliance of a few to inflate the worth of the many? It's like saying, look at them, therefore I'm great too. Sorry, but that's just another mask we wear to hide the uncomfortable truth. Humanity's genius is as much about luck and circumstance as it is about talent. What do you think, dear listeners? Are we elevating a myth to feel better about our own mediocrity? Let's hear your thoughts. Moreover, the word genius encodes a bold dream of one day overturning Darwinism and annulling the verdict that evolution has passed on humanity. Let's be honest. There's no theory more despised by humanity than Darwin's creation. With great reluctance and endless caveats, Homo sapiens accepted their animal lineage but struggles to reconcile with the idea that their brains, like the rest of their body, share this evolutionary history which many find unpalatable. By virtue of their very existence, geniuses allow dreams to endure, and the unsolved mysteries of the mind to imply that things are more complex than Charles Darwin and Ivan Pavlov had suggested. In culture, geniuses play the same role that saints do in religion. They form the backbone of the myth that sustains humanity's majestic posture. For many, genius is a profoundly important and sensitive topic, preserving faith in humanity and its highest purpose, as well as in individuality and personality. It would be better not to touch genius with a cold scalpel, but the presence of unknown properties calls into question our understanding of the origin and development of the human brain. Unfortunately, this circumstance negates any delicacy regarding the matter. How do we understand the nature of a phenomenon? First, we must trace its origin, and it's quite simple. From the end result, we must descend the chain of evolutionary events to the ancestral seed from which everything grew. It always exists. Let me offer a simple example. To uncover the origins of the Boeing 737, we simply reverse engineer the discoveries and inventions that led to the aircraft's current state. We begin our descent, naturally skipping all standard aircraft models to the triplanes of the early 20th century and Wilkins gliders of the 19th century. We'll reach Burattini's ornithopters of the 17th century, then logically descend to the Renaissance gliders and King Bladud's flying machines. Further down, we'll find Archytas of Tarentum with his hand-powered flyers, and digging even deeper into the centuries, we'll eventually find tattered rags and sticks left by some unknown madman who dared to flap wings over the abyss. Strictly speaking, even this unknown dead man isn't the true ancestral point. He's merely the furthest reach of human attempts, a great-great-grandfather of the Boeing, but not the airplane's primal cause. The true origin lies much further down the timeline. Thus, our descent continues through the feathered and leathery wings of birds, pterosaurs, and bats, then through the membranes of flying frogs and the translucent chitin of various Meganosoptera. From there, we trace back to the fin extensions of fish, diving into the depths of the primordial ocean until we encounter the true, albeit unexpected, prototype. Fortunately, everything in the universe, without exception, has its evolution and a calculable ancestral point. The same applies to genius. Its headquarters is undoubtedly the brain. This becomes evident when one whimsically stirs the convolutions of, say, Sir Isaac Newton with a common mixer. Hypothetically, in 5 minutes, the mixer could turn Isaac into an ordinary idiot. Respected Isaac would never experience problems with gravity or aberrations again, but this would be a spectacular but pointless experiment. Sure, we'd end up with some cerebral moose, but this delicacy wouldn't answer our main question. Was genius a product of these convolutions or merely a chance visitor? Is there a special brain whose potential far exceeds that of other Homo sapiens? To solve these riddles, we must first understand what the brain is, and from there begin our descent through the milestones of its evolutionary geography. End of Chapter 2. Wow. I have to say this has been an incredible experience for me. For the very first time, I've just read aloud, in English, one of the most thought-provoking books I've ever come across, Alexander Nevzorov's The Origins of Genius and Fascism. This book has never been translated into English, and what you've just heard is its first ever reading in this language. What makes this even more special is that I've been sitting here, translating it myself directly from the Russian original. It's a fascinating process, and sharing Nevzorov's sharp, unapologetic ideas with you is a privilege. His fearless perspective, the way he dismantles myths and challenges sacred ideas, it's bold, brilliant, and exactly what we need to shake things up. In these first 2 chapters, Nevzorov takes us on a journey to dissect the myths of genius and divinity. He confronts us with the unsettling truth. Figures like Jesus and Satan are not supernatural, but reflections of the human mind and its cultural constructs. Their mythologies, like the concept of genius itself, have shaped our perceptions of intelligence, faith, and even morality. But Nevzorov doesn't stop there. He challenges us to see how these myths still linger, influencing our understanding of brilliance, individuality, and our place in the universe. If you're as intrigued by Nevzorov's work as I am, go check out his YouTube channel. He's one of the brightest anti-war voices in the Russian-speaking world and a relentless critic of Putin's regime. His contributions to the informational battle against this bloody aggression are immense and deserve our gratitude. You'll find a link to his channel in the description of this episode. If this resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening. Drop us a review, share your thoughts in the comments, and tell a friend about this episode. It really helps the show grow. And hey, follow us on YouTube Shorts and TikTok under Mindset Maverick Official for more content and updates. All right, that's a wrap for today. Keep questioning, keep challenging, and most of all, keep showing up. This is your space to think freely, and I'm so glad you're here. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and don't forget, in night we trust.